biblical reference, which is when he was talking about, well, the poor is always going to be with you. Well, I've been poor, and you realize when you're poor that the struggle is always going to be with you.
Fair.
If I take a break from struggling right today, it's still going to be there tomorrow. That's
Mhm.
why I deserve a break. And if I take it, I take it. And in fact, I would turn that glove inside out and say the people with the privilege are the ones who should be out on the street if they want people on the
I
street
agree
so
with you.
badly. If they want people on the beat so badly, go out. Where are you? I went out to the hands off march here in Atlanta. There were sprinklings of black people. There weren't very many black people,
I heard that.
and I posted about that. And some people's like, well, I hope they do this, and I hope they get off, get up and join the fight. And this, I understand that, but where was the rest of everybody else? Where were all the people who typing this? I mean, I know some of them were part of the protest, but the people who are most impacted have always been the most impacted. They will always be the most impacted. If they choose a little bit of rest in the middle of the kingdom falling,
Let them rest.
I'm having a hard time condemning them for that.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Dream Leapers. I'm your host, Harriet Cole. You know, what we do here on Dream Leapers often is to talk to people who are manifesting their dreams so that you will be inspired to manifest your own. We also talk to people who are challenging the status quo and taking a good hard look at what sometimes stands in the way of our dreams. So, our guest today is doing both of those things and has for a very long time. Let me tell you about him. Today, we are welcoming a powerful voice in American journalism and cultural commentary. He is Charles M. Blow. I'm sure you recognize him. He was a contributor, is a contributor, and has been for a long time on MSNBC. He's been a featured guest on CNN, PBS, and he hosted his own show, Prime with Charles M. Blow, on the Black News Channel. Recently, he was the subject of the HBO documentary South to Black Power, which is based on his own bold call for political re-empowerment through reverse migration. We're going to talk about that. And that's outlined in his best-selling book, The Devil You Know, a Black Power Manifesto. Charles is also the author of the acclaimed and deeply personal memoir, Fire Shut Up in My Bones, a story so moving it was adapted into an opera, and it made history as the first work by a Black composer performed at the Metropolitan Opera. Charles is a renowned columnist, and he was also a graphic designer who contributed to the New York Times for, I think, like 30 years. He's going to tell us. He is currently the inaugural recipient of the Langston Hughes Fellowship at the W.E.B. Du Bois Research Institute at Harvard University. Charles Blow honors truth and change, and he serves as a leading voice in informing the national conscience. And today, he is here with us to share his story and tell us more about how he continues to grow and pivot. Welcome, Charles.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
So when I saw you at FIT a couple weeks ago, I was like, oh, I have to talk to you because you are always a bold voice who tells the truth as you know it. And, you spend a lot of time. I watched some of your interviews, not just writing, but really thinking critically about what is going on in our culture. And, we're back to what, when I turn on the news in the morning, is the world still going to be here? So I'm very curious, what happens for you? Like, and when you wake up in the morning, do you have that feeling in the pit of your stomach that we had a few years ago and it's back for many?
Strangely, I don't.
Mm,
Um, you know, I panic, um, uh, being exhausted, being traumatized is so expensive emotionally that the human body and mind cannot sustain it. So it will do something else. It will create if it has to. it is one of the reasons why, although I am not a particularly religious person, I completely understand enslavement religiosity.
Mm.
Completely understand it.
They
Like
had to they had to have
the
something.
mind needs a break. You
Mhm.
have to have refuge. And they found refuge even though they couldn't physically find refuge. They found spiritual refuge. And I completely understand that because I feel like that is happening for a lot of Black people now. They're just finding it in music and joy.
Mm.
It's not that they cannot intellectually process the dangers faced by the country, that when things go bad in the country, they go even worse for Black people. It's not that they believe that they will be insulated. I certainly don't believe that I will be insulated from this. And yet, the incredible injury that was caused by the last election, we don't talk about it that way. That is exactly what it is. It is an immense trauma that Black people suffered, in part because we had never gotten to the finish line and lost.
Mm.
We'd only been to the finish line twice, with one person.
Right.
Barack Obama made it to the finish line twice, and he won.
Yes.
We had never made it to the finish line and been rejected, not lost, been
Yeah, it was a rejection.
rejected, been rejected, and been rejected in a way not for an option that was fine and serviceable, for a chaotic, destructive option. Like, you chose the fire rather than us, and that injured a lot of people.
Mhm.
Um, and so I think
But is
all of
it
that.
but so Charles, I think some people are afraid that it's a mortal wound.
I don't believe that.
Okay.
First, there's always another generation who comes along, younger people who have their own ideas about what freedom looks like, what resistance looks like, all those things. That has always been the case. We've always been led by the young people.
Mhm.
This pain, this hurt was for, I think, slightly older people. Right? This was, we shouldn't count, they have sped up the generation. We're naming a new generation every 5 or 6 years now, but this is not the people who were the organizers for BLM even.
That's true.
This th- those people are hurt because, what do you mean we did all that marching? What do you mean you guys knelt in the Capitol with kente cloths around your neck? What do you mean you did all this
Mm.
and you didn't mean it? What does that mean? Like, it is painful. And I think people are hesitant to also say painful because they don't want to allow America to have hurt them this badly,
Mm.
even if it is true. They don't want to acknowledge that they could be hurt by America. They don't want to acknowledge that they could have believed, who could have allowed themselves to believe, because there's a part of us who know a lot of history who believe that if you had allowed yourself to believe even a little bit, that was naive.
Mm.
Like, we want to say, I'd never believe. I always knew this. I always knew that. I didn't. I didn't. I personally didn't always know that America would rather burn it all down than to share it with us. You know, be, there is a history of burn it all downness,
Yes.
um, but they were burning us down. They weren't burning their own houses down. This is burning your own house down. That is, that's a different level of kind of psychosis. That is a different level of commitment to white supremacy, that you don't mind destroying it for yourself to prevent sharing it.
That's deep. That so many thoughts are going through my head, but one of them, and I'm saying it out loud, okay? See, you're getting me to say this out loud. So there's an Afrikaner in the White House who didn't get elected. And there are a lot of people who don't even know what that means. But if you do know what it means, that the level of frightening is at a very high level. And then I think about that, and then I think about what happened to the continent of Africa in the 1600s when the Europeans decided that, their young buck sons and nephews and whatever, they would divide up the continent and give it to them. Okay, this is yours, this is yours, this is yours. It somehow, Charles, it feels like something like that is happening now. And in that, look, this country is so young, there is no guarantee that it remains the global force. But what is happening? What is happening with this shuffle of allegiances, and what is that big picture that's happening with this, moving the chess pieces around the global board?
Well, I mean, first, I think you have to separate that into some things we know and some things we don't. Nobody knows,
True.
and maybe even the people who are doing it haven't thought it out well enough for it to be a plan. On one hand, on the other hand, it is clear. The one of the biggest advantages or necessities of this level of destruction is to move swiftly. Another necessity is to have a multi-pronged approach, which is what we're saying. So you're seeing simultaneously grift, corruption, destruction, anti-blackness, leaning into a kind of white dominionism. All that's happening at the same time. So it's very interesting when you hear or you see dialogue, whether comments or social media, and people will latch onto one thing. No, you really need to focus on the grift. Well, actually, that's happening, but all the things are happening simultaneously. That is the strategy, which is to have so much happening, so many fireworks exploding around your head that you can't focus on any particular thing and organize around it. How do you organize around an issue when the dimensions of that issue are expanding every day in different directions, right? So that's part of the strategy. There is the other strategy that is, just bravado and personalized to the man in the White House, right? So this is wanting to have people come to him begging and pleading. There's something that feeds something in him about that. So or being able to push people around and bully people, even if they're your friends. So you push Canada around, you try to steal Greenland from the Netherlands. You just do things because it throws your weight around, and I am the big guy in the locker room.
Right.
So there's that happening. It has nothing to do with the other things that are happening. The defunding of U.S. AID is going to decimate parts of Africa, both in hunger terms, HIV, all sorts of ways. That's happening. That is rooted in a disregard for Black bodies in poor countries. But simultaneously, you need to establish dominance among the people in the locker room. And that's what he's doing on this other hand. So all the things are happening. And I think it is problematic and reductive to try to say one thing is happening. Oh, this is the main thing you have to pay attention to. No, the whole point is that to decentralize the attack so that there is no main thing.
Right. And just even trying to understand what you just said is exhausting.
It's exhausting.
And Kamala Harris said something as she was leaving the White House, which I thought was really interesting, was take care of yourselves. You all really have to take care of yourselves because this is a long fight. And if you don't take care of yourselves, you won't be able to do it. And I think a lot of people have looked introspectively, what can I do in order physically and spiritually and emotionally to survive and be able to fight? And then, as you just described, where am I supposed to be fighting? And we do not yet see, at least I have not seen any clear leadership on whatever side we're supposed to be on. So if we have 20 things that we need to be fighting, shouldn't somebody be organizing folks around those 20 things.
Well, I mean, I guess I would disagree just a little bit. I mean, I do think that people are trying to assert themselves as leaders. I just don't think anyone has captured the moment and has
Fair,
articulated the
fair.
message in a way that it reaches most people. And until that personality, whatever, that idea, that group emerges, there won't be an organizing center to hold it. Uh, but that said, I mean, I
That's
think,
a fair point.
yeah, that idea that um, people are tired and need to take care of themselves. There's also, a fatalism that has settled in among a lot of people, which is, I'm not going to fight the fire. I'm going to sift through the ashes when it's done. That I am tired of fighting the fire. And I don't. The truth is, and maybe, you know, people can say what they will about me for having this opinion. I don't even. I try to understand that. I don't even judge it. I don't even I There was a time when I would have looked at people like that and been preaching, you have to do this and you have to do that. But everyone, I believe, on some level understands their own capacities. And the fact that Black people have collectively, without leadership, made a decision about self-care, about detachment. There's no person that stood up and said, do this.
Right.
Every, if you, I was going to write a thing about religious leaders. And so I was watching not all, but I was watching several online big Black churches and their services the Sunday after the election.
Mm.
They were they were saying, take care of yourself. Like everyone, it wasn't a centralized message. Separately, people
Well, but
made a
Kamala did
decision.
make the point. She
Yeah,
said it too.
I don't think these
You
people are
don't think
following
okay,
Kamala. I think that she was part of it. I think that she was
okay.
part of tapping in. She's Black. Like the
Sure is.
sentiment was take care of yourself. And
Yeah,
it wasn't because one person said it.
right.
We from the ground up, we felt it
Sure.
and we
And
decided to take care of ourselves. And
yeah,
that is such a powerful thing to have happened almost spontaneously
yes.
for masses of people to have the same sentiment, that I have to try to understand that and appreciate that a collective trauma defense kicked
Mm,
in. And it is not only foolish, but I think probably harmful to keep saying to people, but you can't have that trauma defense.
right.
It is irresponsible for you to have that trauma defense, or this person, these people didn't rest or whatever. But that is not historically accurate. There are plenty of periods during even our most activist people had periods of rest or fallow periods.
Sure. Hey guys, this is Dream Leapers with Harriet Cole. We are talking with Charles M. Blow, who is already we go into the heart of the matter, which I really love. Just know he has written 2 incredible books, The Devil You Know, A Black Power Manifesto, and Fire Shut Up in My Bones. And we will get to talking about those in a few. But one of the things I think you're addressing, Charles, what is it, 92, 93% of Black women voted for Kamala Harris, a solid block. And there have been plenty of women that said, I did my part. Now it's your turn. I'm exhausted. And to those people who are saying that, I certainly understand. Nobody can beat you up. We probably still need you in the fight, but maybe this is a rest moment and then you come back. Whether it's fair or not to put the burden on our shoulders, I think we can't afford to lose anybody in the
Mm-hmm.
fight. But I was just at an event where Angela Davis spoke, and it was really fascinating. She talked about one of the things was about the power of the individual and the terror of individualism. And when people make the mistake of thinking that just one can do whatever, then usually whatever the effort is fails. But what has worked for so long in culture is for people to have community. so that when one is tired, one can rest. And there's always another member of the community who can stand up and carry forth. And I thought that that was very interesting, especially in times like these, where, of course, it's good for you to have your individual creativity and all the things that make you you, but also to understand that you're not in it alone, nor should you mistakenly believe that.
Hmm.
Uh, we have seen the impact of people working together. And I do sometimes worry because if you go to corporate America, there is still often an environment where there's one Black person in leadership. Very quickly, that might even deteriorate more because of this push against DEI, which is a misguided push, but nonetheless is there. And so I just wonder, what are your thoughts on what's happening, uh, collective versus the one?
Well, it's hard for me to understand. What do you mean when you are pointing out the one in this particular scenario? Like, who are the individuals that we are talking about?
So what I was listening to, what it made me think about was when people feel that, well, if I'm getting ahead, I'm okay. I have to do this
Right,
for
right.
me or my family, but I can't stand up for that other person over there because there's only going to be room for one. And with
Well, right.
DEI, with that whole DEI thing of, anti us, then what happens?
uh, I think it is truly tragic when we allow the white supremacist theory of scarcity to dictate our lives and how we interact. And I see that happen a lot.
Hmm.
Um, they compare you to the other Black people
Right.
in the workplace, and then you end up, you have to. For me, I'm like conscious about it. Like, I'm not doing that. You're
Right.
not gonna. I'm gonna root for that person. Like, even I don't even have to like that person, but I'm rooting for the idea that their Blackness should not be an impediment to them nor to me.
Hmm.
Uh, and I think a lot of times, regardless of whether the organization is liberal or conservative, or whatever, they do this thing where they make you buy into the idea of your own scarcity
Yep.
and then lift you up as you're the only one. And then when someone who looks like has a similar background as you come into the space, then you're constantly compared against each other. Not doing that. That is that is a function of white supremacy. I don't care if it's liberal, conservative, or whatever. That is what that is. I grew up in a majority Black town, went to a historically Black high school, a historically Black college. My first job was in Detroit, which is Black. It was for a long time, the blackest city in America. And when I
Yep.
moved to Brooklyn, I moved into Shirley Chisholm's old district. I don't believe in this whole concept of scarcity of Black people. I grew up going into rooms and the smartest person in every one of those rooms was a Black person. I
Mm.
always just assumed that I could be the smartest person in one of those rooms. And also, we collectively had a you rise, I rise,
Yes.
we rise together ideal. You were cheering for each other. So when I came into spaces where they try to pit the one Black person against the one other Black, this sounds crazy to me.
Mhm.
I can't buy into this because I can see this for what it is. And for all the people who can't, who hold their oneness, their I
Mm.
am the only one Negro in the space as some sort of trophy or badge, and will, you know, rip the throat out of any other Black person who comes into the space because they believe in the scarcity. I pity those people. Those people could have been, leaders in the resistance. They could have been the best of us if they believed in the rest of us.
Mm. powerful. And, unfortunately, those people exist, and I think it does take people being conscious of how they grew up, and your description of how you grew up, the communities that you were in, that you put yourself in. I think that probably by the time you were at the New York Times, you brought all of this strength and clarity of who you are to an environment that needed all of that consciousness.
And was never threatened by another Black person in my life.
Mm.
Always greeted them with a smile, like, "Oh my God, you're here, let's have lunch." Like that,
Mhm.
that sense of being settled in ourselves, even if everybody else is pitting us against each other, we have to block that out
Mhm.
because I am all you have, and you are all that I have.
And I hope people are hearing this. This is very important, especially now when, people's livelihoods are being impacted by whatever. And I say, this diversity, equity, and inclusion does not mean Black people. It means all kinds of people. It means looking through a lens that is a fair lens at each other and being welcoming. And for this fear that folks have that they're going to lose their power and all this that has been since the beginning of time, since folks started stealing things that weren't theirs. I think there's a fear on the other side that is making this push so great. But also, and so this is a pivot to something that you explore a lot in Fire Shut Up in My Bones. Your story, there's much about your story, but in particular, the fact that you let people know that you're bisexual.
Mhm.
And on day one of Trump coming into office, even before, he was talking about how there are only going to be two genders and all of these things that are making an attempt at erasure of a very large part of our culture and
Mhm.
community
Mhm.
that can be life-threatening, literally, for people. And I wonder, looking at that, because that's for you, because you are a cultural critic, it's
Mhm.
professional, but it's also personal.
Right. Well, I think that what is happening with the attack on transgender Americans, everyone should be paying very close attention to that because it is not about the targets themselves, although they are being targeted. They're afraid, and no one should live with that sort of fear. But the strategy is what is the bigger issue,
Mhm.
because that strategy they are going to repeat on other groups. So they felt like they were getting no traction and had kind of lost when they were attacking the center. These were gay and lesbian people who wanted to live more like the straight world had lived. They wanted the same rights. They wanted to get married. They wanted to adopt children. These were kind of more mainstream, and more Americans started to agree with that. They changed their tactic. Don't attack the center, attack the edge. They went as far to the edge as they could with transgender Americans. They were
Mhm.
smaller. Fewer people knew someone who was transgender. You could more easily mock or misrepresent what they were doing, who they were. These are men in dresses. That was the whole thing.
Mhm.
Democrats don't know the difference between a man and a woman. This is a man in a dress in your daughter's bathroom. This is a man in a dress reading your daughter and your son's books at a library. They're gonna, as the president said, you send your kid to school, they come back in a couple of days, and basically they've been castrated. That was the essence of what he said, not the words that he said. So it was that attacking the extremes, really bullying,
Yes.
like punching way down. This is a tiny, tiny, tiny group. But if you can get your way in, then you can attack the thing you really want, which is the center, the LGBT, all the lesbian, gay
Right.
relationships, legality of their marriages. That's what they want. They're just
Right.
going to start there, and they've gotten a toe in the door. And I think what Americans should think about is how many issues on which that is happening. Go to the extreme, get your foot in the door, and then run back towards the middle. This idea of snatching people off the street, some of whom are you know, their offenses that they've had an opinion that you didn't like that was published, and sending them to a country that they're not from,
Right.
to a private prison. You know, if they can get away with that, that's an extreme thing that then marches back towards the center. Then who is safe from being snatched off the street? If they can start to arrest American citizens, I think people are not paying attention to the strategy.
Mm.
All around us, at the edges, is where these attacks are happening. They're testing their abilities to do things. And it's when they can get an opportunity, they're going to run that back towards the center. And none of us are safe from that. So it's not whether or not you agree with, you know, trans people are transitioning. Quite frankly, who cares? It's not your life. You're not doing it. But even if you do disagree with it, it's not really about that. What it's about is testing the boundaries of civil protections and what the law will protect and what the law will allow them to do. And once they can figure out that the fences are weak or the fences are completely down, then none of you are safe.
Wow. Hey guys, this is Dream Leapers with Harriet Cole, and we are in conversation with I'm just going woo. Charles M. Blow. He has written 2 books: The Devil You Know, a Black Power Manifesto, and Fire Shut Up in My Bones. And we are really exploring what's going on in our culture right now. And as my mother would say, putting on our thinking caps, because this is what we need to do. We all need to pause and think, and we appreciate that that's what is happening right here in this conversation, Charles. Um, you in your Black Power Manifesto book, you are espousing an idea that I think makes a lot of sense, and it makes me think of what Marcus Garvey wanted to do. What this notion of claiming our power where our people are, where there could be a majority. And you have suggested go back home, go down south. Like people used to always, because of the Great Migration, everybody moved everywhere. But every summer, the kids would get in the car with the parents and go home to grandmas or aunties or whoever it was in the summer. And some people are moving to
Mm-hmm.
the south. Like Atlanta is growing very
Mm-hmm.
quickly, and
Mm-hmm.
uh, Fallon, who works with me, is in Alabama, and Alabama's a lot of interesting stuff is happening
Mm-hmm.
in Alabama. Could you tell us what your philosophy is and what you think can happen?
Well, I don't want to take up too much of your time. I'll try to condense this, but um, at the end of the Civil War, 3 southern states were majority Black. And 3 or 4 others were within a few percentage points of being majority Black, and that meant a lot. We talk about Reconstruction mostly in terms of what the federal government did, but because Black people were literally the majority of voters in places like Mississippi, they could do things on the local level. That meant they sent scores of representatives to the state house. Louisiana passed the state constitution that had all sorts of amazing, hard to believe things before Jim Crow. It was integrated public schools, protection of property rights for everyone. You know, there were things happening around Black power because Black people had enough voting power to make it happen on a state level. And because the United States, the Constitution divides half the power between the federal government and the states. And in fact, the language of the Constitution says it reserves all rights that are not specifically outlined in the Constitution for the states. Much of what Black people care about and affects them on a daily basis is state run and dominated. The criminal code, educational policy, some health policy, distribution of major contracts for all sorts of things. That includes natural resources, but also development, highways, airports, all sorts of things. States are giving out those contracts. And so if we want a real stake in the future power of the country, we have to have some of the state power. And this is, you know, white America has had majorities in all states but Hawaii for decades. But in the near future, Hispanics will have majorities in some of the southwestern states. Um, White people will maintain majorities in some of the plain states in the middle west, and some of the eastern and southern states will have a white plurality, though not majority. But none of those states are projected to have white black majorities. So
Mm.
the future of power, state power, will be multicultural. It just won't, any of it won't, none of it will be black. And that's a problem to me.
That is. How well are people listening?
It's hard to know, because uh, uh, I'm living in Atlanta, so I run into people all the time and say, I moved, I moved. That's really lovely. But it's no way to know mass numbers. I have, for years, tried to talk to Black mayors and Black leaders of Black organizations because it can't, I can outline a theory, but to put something in practice, it takes big government and
Sure.
big money. And only these big national organizations can do this. Uh, I have not been particularly happy with their response because, you know, the municipal South is black. Almost every major city I would say most at this point, major cities in the South have black mayors.
Mm.
Most capital cities in the South have black mayors and a majority of black cities. You could at least welcome the people back. They're coming in, they're showing up. You could at least say, there could be a program to to
Mm.
recognize this is happening. There is a reverse migration to the South. We are receiving these people. Can we acknowledge and welcome them home?
That's a great idea. I think of, what happened with Ghana, the great
Yes,
homecoming.
they did an amazing job. It is an amazing PR job
Amazing.
and people are showing up and they
And
are
continuing.
welcome. Yes,
Yeah.
they are welcome. And I think about I live in Atlanta. There's no welcome, there's no activity, there's no acknowledgement that Atlanta is largely a migrant city.
Mm.
And these are not necessarily reverse migrants. These are people moving here from Memphis, moving here from North Florida. These are regional migrants, but these are migrants. It's very hard to find the people who are born and raised in Atlanta.
Mm.
This is what's happening in a lot of cities in the South. These are people who are migrants either from the surrounding area, more rural areas, or reverse migrants. And acknowledging that, and setting up structures where at least people feel seen, that is important too, psychologically, that these Black cities are welcoming you.
So, should you be running for office?
Absolutely not.
Because it sounds like it. Look, it sounds just saying. Well, so for so many years, you were writing a column in the New
Yes,
York Times, sharing your
yes,
well-informed thoughts about so many different things, and you just stopped that. And
yes.
where are you writing? Where can we find your
I'm
voice?
I'm taking a break right now from writing.
We don't really
Uh
want you to.
uh well,
Don't you get that from folks?
I will say this. I am working on two projects that require some writing, but they're not news things. So I'm working on a new book. We're doing book proposals, so it's a lot of writing of that. And then I'm working on a project with the MacArthur Foundation and Press Forward to help save local journalism. And so there's a lot of work that I'm doing. It's just
Mhm.
not um, writing about current events and that. So I'm taking a break from that sort of writing, but I am still working, very much working. Um,
I am sure I'm not the first person to say, "No!"
listen, it is I want to see what I want to write
Sure.
and see if I want another. schedule like a column schedule. It's a
Why?
grind a little bit, but um, and maybe I do, but I'm not rushing. I don't feel like I have anything to prove. I don't feel like if I don't write my voice alone was keeping the world glued together and it's going to fall apart. That would require so much ego and that I don't have. Um, and I do make a few smaller observations social media. um I There are things that I'm interested in though. I am interested in what is the psychology of Black people in this moment. I'm super interested in that. I am super interested in how Black institutions have tried to figure out who they are, forced to figure out who they are
Mhm.
without the supports of allies that they thought they had. Um, it is a moment in
An awakening.
American Blackness. Yes, um, it is.
What are you seeing when you say that this is a moment in American Blackness? I agree with you, but I'm wondering because it's like the mask has come off, and suddenly, oh, you're not there. I thought you were there. You're not there. So where am I? What are you seeing happening within our organizations?
Well, there. I haven't done a comprehensive survey,
Mhm.
so I'll just say that there are anecdotes that are interesting. The Black churches, I guess they're led by Jamal, or Jamal is one of the most outspoken um, pastors among them, but I think it's a group of them trying to flex a little bit more muscle and organizing capacity,
Mhm.
because there are not groups organizing in the street that you had like with Black Lives Matter. Well, let me say that. There are people organizing all the time. It's
Yeah,
just that none of them are as big right now as Black
right.
Lives Matter became. Um, so that's interesting. Talking to university professors about how they are dealing with what will likely be shortfalls in funding or cuts in funding, or what does DEI mean when you're a predominantly Black university? How can you even comply with this if they are asking you to remove that in order to save your funding? Uh, but seeing the wheels turn in, um, I don't want to mischaracterize it, but there is some part of it that I want to call an awakening.
Mhm.
Not a historical awakening as if you were never exposed to oppression,
Mhm.
but there was just a period where people just believed that progress, no matter how slow, no matter how many times we stumbled and fell, no matter how many times we might have took one step back, we would eventually take two steps forward. That this idea of destined progress has been damaged, if not destroyed. And then what do you do when you cannot be assured that progress will continue? And in fact, you may be living in a world of regression. And I'm always thinking of what happened after Reconstruction. Like, you thought, you
Mm.
slavery ended, the North won the war, Reconstruction, they send troops, they let you vote, they pass the 13th, 14th, 15th Amendments. I mean, things are just happening so fast. And it just feels like it's progress after progress after progress. And then it crashes to the ground.
Right.
And then, so what does that do to a person psychologically to be returned to a point that they never thought they'd be back at? That's what's happening with Black America right now. And so I feel like documenting that would be really, that's not the book I'm writing, but that's like the kind of meat and potatoes of something that I would like to read. And I think the things you would many times the things that you would be best at writing are the things you want to read.
True. Well, that is true. So you're the inaugural fellow for Du Bois program at Harvard.
Mhm.
Well, being inaugural means you get to kind of set the stage in a way for what it's going to be. But what are you doing, and why did you decide to do that?
Because I want to write this book,
Hmm.
and the Hutchins Center and Du Bois Institute, you can't match the research power that they have.
Hmm.
And this is a historical book that I'm writing. And I kept thinking, I can't write it because I don't know how. I have no idea how to get this done. Like I've been sitting in archives and I'm like, I can do this, but transcribing one letter in cursive from the 1800s is like a day and a half. So it's it's a lot. So
So you get a team of researchers who are
they're
working
going
with
to
you?
help with the research, and that's the big thing. And I will,
Amazing.
talk about and do little lectures about what I'm finding and that sort of thing. But the big thing is that they are kind of partners in this massive
Beautiful.
project that I want to do.
And what's your timeline?
So I will, it's a year-long fellowship. So I will basically go on the books, I think in July, but no one will be there summertime. But so it'll be the next calendar year.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's amazing. Hey guys, this is Dream Leapers with Harriet Cole. We are talking with Charles M. Blow. Whew. I, it's a lot to take in, Charles, that what we've been talking about. And you know, I like when I'm in spaces and people want to have real conversations about what's going on in the world, not angry conversations.
Yes.
I mean, we can get angry, but it doesn't matter if you get
Right.
angry. I think we need strategy too. You know,
Right.
as I opened, what we talk about a lot with people here is manifesting dreams. And I wanted to talk to you about some of these things that are standing in the way, and there's a
Hmm.
lot standing in the way.
Hmm.
So what can average person, somebody in earshot of us right now, what can people do to claim their power and community? Do you have action points for
I
folks that
don't have action points, but what I tell myself is be ready,
mm,
because people will not long tolerate oppression, particularly people who uh, don't have a lived experience
mm,
of the worst kinds of oppression, right? My mother was born before Jim Crow, like she during Jim Crow, before civil rights movement, so she has a longer lens. Young people have none of that. My kids come of age, the consciousness when Barack Obama was the president.
right?
They have no lived
Oh,
muscle memory of oppression. So those kids are watching this and like, what is happening? They don't have they don't have the capacity to return to knowing how to navigate that. So they will resist it. They will eventually
mm.
reflexively resist it. I tell myself, just be ready. If you're resting right now, make sure your rest is done, because there's going to come a time when those kids are going to be in the street for something, rallying around some issue, around some crystallizing part of this will 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 strike the match and light the fire. And when that happens, make sure your rest is done.
That makes sense. And you know, something that you said, I think it made me think about the divisions in our culture, because yes, I do think there are many young people, well, based upon their age, they may not have known from Barack Obama or even, you know, since, but there's there's still the knee on the neck. There's still so many people in impoverished communities in particular who feel like they are on the front lines, like they are in a war zone, and they're not feeling the freedoms that you and I and our kids may have experienced. That is still so
Yes,
real.
but when I think about those people, this is a biblical reference, which is when he was talking about, well, the poor is always going to be with you. Well, I've been poor, and you realize when you're poor that the struggle is always going to be with you.
Very.
If I take a break from struggling right today, it's still going to be there tomorrow. That's why when I learned as a young poor person, nobody parties harder than poor people. No, but because you need the relief of it.
Right.
It is part of the coping mechanism. We are gonna turn up. It's not. We don't have to have the big decorations. We're just gonna get enough meat to put on this grill. We're gonna turn that music up high and let the uncles get a bottle of something, and we're gonna have a big party. It doesn't have to be for really any real reason. And when I see people taking these breaks, even poor people who have the boot on the neck, they know the boot is not going anywhere. I deserve a break. And if I take it, I take it. And in fact, I would turn that glove inside out and say the people with the privilege are the ones who should be out on the street if they want people on the
I
street
agree
so
with you.
badly. If they want people on the beach so badly, go out. Where are you? You know, I went out to the hands off march here in Atlanta. There were sprinklings of black people. There weren't very many black people.
I heard that.
And I posted about that, and some people's like, well, I hope they do this, and I hope they get off, get up and join the fight. And this, I understand that, but where was the rest of everybody else? Where were all the people who typing this? I mean, I know some of them were part of the protest, but the people who are most impacted have always been the most impacted. They will always be the most impacted. If they choose a little bit of rest in the middle of the kingdom falling, I'm just having
Let
a
'em
hard
rest.
I'm having a hard time condemning them for that.
I'm glad you said that because the misplaced condemnation just makes things worse. We need to keep our eyes on the prize. It's not each other that we need to be fighting, right?
Right.
Thank you so much.
No,
This
my
is
pleasure.
a very meaningful conversation. We appreciate you, and we're excited to see what's coming next. You've already done a tremendous amount of great work that definitely inspires us, but we look forward to seeing what's next. Thank you, Charles.
Thank you so much.
And thank all of you for tuning in. I hope that you gained as much as I did. Until next time, have a great day and make it count.